They said the Alpha King was cursed, not by steel, not by spell, but by something crueler, by touch itself. One brush of a woman's skin against his, and his body burned as though venom flowed in his veins. Every hand that dared reach for him became his enemy. Every caress felt like a blade. And so the most powerful wolf in the realm lived as though he were untouchable. Wild Hearts, welcome back to Tales by Lily Moon. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss the fire, the heartbreak, and the dark romance that waits for you here. Tonight, we begin a tale of power, fate, and the one woman who will defy it all. Morpheus Draven, the Alpha King, sat upon a throne carved from obsidian stone. His crown gleamed with the cold light of moonsteel, but his face was harder than any metal forged. Broad shoulders draped in black furs, hands curled tight against the throne's arms. He looked less like a man, and more like the embodiment of winter itself. The great hall was silent, as it always was. No courtesans lingered at his side. No queen sat upon the throne beside him. No woman dared stand within arm's reach, because they knew what he was, because they had seen what the curse could do. He had been only 16. The moon festival was alive with music and laughter. Lanterns burned gold above the palace courtyard, and noble women in shimmering gowns twirled like petals in the wind. One girl, sweet, brave, and far too innocent, slipped through the crowd to reach him. "Dance with me, my prince," she had whispered, cheeks flushed with courage. Morpheus had hesitated, but when her fingers brushed his palm, fire erupted beneath his skin. Not the warmth of desire, not the spark of fate, but agony. The girl screamed as though her very bones had turned to molten steel. Her body convulsed, crumpling in his arms. He had dropped her, terrified, but it was too late. Her eyes glazed before the healers could arrive. She died with her hands still reaching for him, and all around him the court recoiled in horror. From that night on, Morpheus learned what it meant to be untouchable. Women shrank back when he entered a room. Mothers pulled daughters behind them when he passed. His own father, the former king, spoke of him with bitterness, a son who could never sire an heir, and so the boy who once longed for love grew into a man carved from ice. Now, years later, the throne room still echoed with emptiness. Morpheus rose from his seat, boots striking against marble with ruthless rhythm. His presence commanded silence. He climbed the balcony steps and stood above the kingdom he ruled with iron and fear. Villages stretched beneath the silver moonlight. From this height it looked peaceful, but he knew better. They feared him. They worshipped him, but none truly loved him. Every victory rang hollow. Every battle won left him colder, and every night was lonelier than the last. When he was 20, his council forced a betrothal. A princess, from the east, radiant, cunning, her smiles sweet as poisoned wine. She swore she didn't fear his curse. She vowed her love was strong enough to endure. For weeks, she played the part. But the night before their wedding, she crept into his chambers with a vial of poison hidden in her sleeve. Morpheus caught her before the cup touched his lips. Under torchlight, her mask cracked. "You are no king," she spat. "You're a curse upon us all. You will never touch a woman, never sire a son, never be whole. You should have died the night you were born." She was exiled before dawn, but her words festered like rot in his heart. From then on, Morpheus vowed never to be deceived again, and so he ruled as a shadow king. Untouchable, unyielding, the council pressed him for an heir, but he silenced them with rage. Women lingered at the edge of his halls, but none dared approach. He was power, he was fear, he was alone. Yet even curses have cracks, and even the coldest throne cannot resist the hand of fate forever. For far below the palace, in a marketplace filled with noise and life, a blind Omega named Elara would soon stumble into his path, and with one impossible touch she would rewrite everything. In the heart of the bustling market, where traders shouted over one another and the scent of roasted meats tangled with spices and dust, she walked, Ilara Vera. Her eyes were pure white, clouded like pale glass, seeing nothing of the world around her. And yet she carried herself with quiet grace, guided by a slender cane and the rhythm of her own ears. She heard what others ignored, the scrape of sandals, the flutter of cloth, the uneven breaths of liars, the sting of mockery before it was spoken. She was blind, but not oblivious, and that, perhaps, was the cruelest part. Her pack had never let her forget what she was. "Move aside, useless Omega," someone sneered as her shoulder brushed too close to a stall. "Careful, she'll curse your goods with her blindness," another voice hissed, sending laughter rippling through the crowd. Ilara's lips pressed into silence. She did not argue. She did not defend herself. She had learned long ago that words only fed their cruelty. At home, the scorn was sharper. Her stepbrother Daxon delighted in twisting the knife. "You can't even see the moon," he mocked once, as the pack gathered to howl beneath its silver glow. "What kind of wolf are you? Not even the goddess bothered to bless you." He had shoved her to the dirt that night, her knees scraping raw, while the others laughed. She remembered lifting her face to the sky she could not see, and wishing just once that the goddess might burn them all for their cruelty. But the goddess had been silent, so Ilara endured. She rose each day to the jeers, the loneliness, the ache of never belonging, and in the quiet moments when no one was listening, she dreamed. She dreamed of escape, of running beyond the borders of her pack, of finding a place where her blindness was not a curse, but simply her. That morning, the marketplace brimmed with life. Children darted between stalls. Merchants sang promises of exotic silks and wolf-steel blades. Somewhere, a lute strummed a love song that made her chest ache. She followed the sound, her cane tapping rhythmically against the stones. Each step was careful, practiced. She navigated by memory, by sound, by the whisper of air against her skin. Still, accidents happened. A stall-keeper cursed as she brushed against a stack of fruit. Someone shoved her back into the crowd. She stumbled, but caught herself, clutching her cane. "Worthless Omega," the man spat. Her lips trembled, but she pressed them shut. Tears burned her eyes, unseen. She forced her head high, though no one noticed the pride in a blind girl's stance. And then the world shifted. The crowd's noise faltered, thinning into a strange silence. She could not see it, but she felt it. The air thickened, charged as if the very earth held its breath. A presence moved through the marketplace, heavy boots against stone, a ripple of whispers following in his wake. "Ilara," someone hissed mockingly in her ear. "Careful. The king walks among us." Her stepbrother Daxon shoved her forward into the path of that presence, laughing under his breath. "Let's see if the cursed king enjoys your touch, blind one." She stumbled, her cane slipping from her grasp. Blind and unarmed, she reached out instinctively, desperate for balance. Her hand struck something hard, solid, warm with life. A chest, a body. The crowd gasped. Ilara's breath caught as strong fingers clamped around her wrist. She felt the heat of his skin, the power in his grip. She braced for the recoil, the scream, the agony that always followed when she touched anyone without warning. But it didn't come. Instead, her skin tingled, not with pain, but with something else. Something dangerous. Something alive. And the silence around them deepened until the whole market seemed to hold its breath. For the first time in his life, the cursed king felt nothing but heat. And for the first time in hers, the blind Omega was finally seen. The marketplace held its breath. Merchants stopped mid-shout. Children froze in their play. Even the wind seemed to halt as Morpheus Draven, the cursed Alpha King, stood locked in silence with a frail, blind Omega clinging to him. Her hand was small against his chest, delicate, trembling, and yet it did not burn him. It did not twist his insides in agony, as every other woman's touch had. Instead, heat. Strange, unsettling heat. Morpheus's jaw tightened, his heart beat a heavy drum beneath her palm. He should have flung her away, ordered her execution, made an example before his people. That was what his court expected of him. That was what centuries of fear demanded, and yet he did not move. What sorcery is this? He stared down at her, at the pale, sightless eyes that stared at nothing, at the soft curve of her lips, parted in shock. She was no witch, no siren cloaked in beauty and deceit. She was blind, fragile, a slip of a girl with her cane fallen at her feet. And still she touched him. Every instinct screamed to pull away, to tear her hand from his chest before the curse awoke. But the curse was silent. Instead, a fire, low and dangerous, stirred in his veins. A fire he had never felt. Not lust, not yet, but the first spark of something forbidden. The crowd whispered, "Why isn't she burning?" The curse is broken. No, impossible. Their disbelief scraped against his ears, but he didn't care. His entire focus was on the girl clinging to him, trembling yet unbroken. Her heart thundered in her chest. She had expected pain, the sting of rejection, perhaps even death. Instead, warmth radiated beneath her palm, a steady, living warmth that made her breath hitch. His chest rose and fell beneath her hand. Each inhale a reminder that she was touching the most dangerous man in the kingdom. "Ilara," Daxon's voice hissed from somewhere in the crowd, dripping with mockery and fear. "You've killed yourself now." But she hadn't. Her fingers curled tighter, clinging instinctively to the Alpha King. Though she could not see his face, she could feel the iron grip of his hand locked around her wrist and the terrifying steadiness of his silence. She dared whisper, her voice trembling but clear. "I'm sorry, Your Majesty. I didn't mean—" Her words faltered as his grip shifted, not to strike, not to cast her away, but to hold her steady. Her apology struck him like a blade. She was the one trembling, the one mocked and cast aside. And still she apologized to him. Something inside him growled. "Who is she?" he demanded, his voice cutting through the air like thunder. No one answered. The marketplace bent beneath his power, all eyes averted. Only Daxon sneered from the safety of the crowd. "A blind Omega, my king," he spat. "Useless, worthless. She shouldn't even be here." Morpheus's eyes narrowed. He could feel Ilara's wrist in his grasp. Delicate, fragile, but not worthless. Never worthless. He lowered his gaze to her sightless eyes, his voice a rumble only she could hear. "What is your name?" She swallowed, lips trembling. "Ilara Vera." The name curled through him like smoke, lodging itself deep. Ilara. The crowd expected blood. Instead, they saw the unthinkable. The Alpha King released her wrist, only to place his hand at her elbow, guiding her upright, steadying her as though she were made of something precious. Gasps rippled through the market, and then, with a voice that left no room for argument, he declared, "She comes with me." The world erupted into chaos. Voices clashed, fearful, enraged, bewildered, but Morpheus ignored them all. His hand remained at Ilara's arm as he turned, pulling her gently but firmly toward the palace. Guards fell into step behind him, and the crowd parted in stunned silence. For the first time in history, the untouchable king had touched a woman and lived, and for the first time in her life, the blind outcast had been chosen. That night, the palace would not sleep. Whispers would spread like wildfire. The cursed Alpha King had brought home a girl who should have died at his touch. The blind Omega, who had nothing, had just become the most dangerous woman in the realm. The echo of his words still thundered in the air. "She comes with me." The marketplace had erupted into disbelief, but Morpheus Draven didn't falter. His grip on Ilara's elbow was steady, almost protective as he guided her through the parted crowd. She stumbled once, disoriented by the chaos, but his hand tightened, pulling her closer. The cursed Alpha King, who had never allowed a woman near him, was leading a blind Omega through the streets as though she were something sacred. Her pulse roared in her ears. She could hear whispers around her like venomous snakes. He's bewitched. That girl will be the end of us all. A blind Omega. Impossible. The stone beneath her feet shifted to marble. The marketplace sounds faded into silence, replaced by the hollow echo of steps inside massive halls. The scent of incense, smoke, and cold steel filled her lungs. She realized with a shiver he was taking her into the palace. "Your Majesty," she stammered, her hand trembling against his grip. "Please, I don't understand. I didn't mean... You touched me." Morpheus's voice cut low, rumbling like distant thunder. "And I still breathe." Her lips parted, but she could not answer. What words could she possibly give to a king who had just defied his own curse with her touch? Every step toward the palace burned with questions he could not voice. He had killed women for less. Unwillingly, cursed, their blood on his hands. Yet this one, her hand had lingered on him, and he wanted it back. He studied her fragile frame as they entered the obsidian corridors of his keep. Her cane was still lost in the marketplace, so she stumbled blindly unless he steadied her. She was vulnerable in a way that twisted his insides, awakening something he hadn't felt in centuries. Not pity, not mercy, possession. She was proof that his curse could be broken, proof that he might not be destined for eternal solitude and rot. And he could not, would not, let her go. "Your Majesty." The voice came from the shadows ahead. Torren Vale, Beta of the Shadow Fang Pack, stepped into the torchlight. His dark hair was bound back, his eyes sharp and unreadable as they flicked to Ilara. He bowed, but there was tension in his movements. "You bring a guest." "She stays," Morpheus said, tone brooking no argument. Torren's jaw tightened. He looked again at the trembling blind Omega, who seemed utterly out of place in the cavernous hall, then back at his king. "My lord, this is dangerous." Morpheus's eyes narrowed. "Do you question me, Torren?" "I question fate," Torren replied evenly. "We all know what happens when a woman touches you. And yet she stands. Why?" "That," Morpheus said, his voice like ice, "is what I intend to discover." Their words cut through her like blades. She wasn't supposed to be here. She was no one, less than no one. Yet now she was standing between the most feared Alpha in the realm and his Beta, their eyes on her as though she were a weapon waiting to go off. Her voice came out in a whisper. "Please, just send me home." The silence that followed was suffocating. Morpheus turned his head slowly, his gaze like a physical weight pressing her still. "There is no home for you now," he said. "Not after this." Her lips parted, breath catching. She wanted to protest, but Torren spoke first. "My king, this will bring unrest," Torren warned. "The people already whisper. They will see weakness where there is none. They will think you compromised." Morpheus stepped closer to Ilara, his shadow enveloping her. "Let them whisper," he growled. "She touched me. She lives. That makes her mine." The word left his mouth before he could stop it. Mine. The thought should have repulsed him, should have sent him spiraling back into rage and coldness. But instead, it settled into him like a chain, binding him to the blind Omega who stood trembling at his side. Torren's expression flickered, shock, then caution, then calculation. "Then I beg you," he said quietly, "be certain of this path, for if you are wrong—" His eyes slid to Ilara. "She won't be the only one destroyed." Morpheus ignored the warning. His hand brushed Ilara's wrist, subtle, grounding. He felt her flinch, then still beneath his touch. She was afraid, but she was here, and that was enough. When they reached his private chambers, the heavy doors closed with a finality that made Ilara's heart race. She stood in the center of the room, lost without her cane, without any sense of where she was. The air smelled of sandalwood and smoke. She could hear the crackle of a fire somewhere to her left. Morpheus watched her from across the room. In the flickering firelight, she looked like something conjured from a dream. Fragile, yes, but there was a strength in the way she held herself, a quiet defiance that called to something deep within him. "Are you afraid of me?" His voice broke the silence. She turned toward the sound, her white eyes searching the darkness she could never escape. "I should be," she said softly. "Everyone else is." He moved closer, his footsteps measured, giving her time to hear him approach. When he stood before her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, he spoke again. "You didn't answer my question." Elara lifted her chin, though her hands trembled at her sides. "Yes," she admitted, "I'm afraid. But not of you. I'm afraid of what this means, of what happens when your court discovers I'm here, of what they'll do to me when they realize I'm nothing special." His hand rose, and she tensed, but he only brushed his fingers against her cheek. The touch was gentle, exploratory, as if he were testing the boundaries of this impossible miracle. "You survived my touch," he murmured. "That makes you the most extraordinary person in this kingdom." Her breath caught. His thumb traced the line of her jaw, and she felt her body respond in ways she'd never experienced. Heat pooled in her stomach. Her skin tingled where he touched her. "Why doesn't it hurt you?" she whispered. "Why am I different?" "If I knew," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "I would have spent my life searching for you." The firelight cast shadows across the room as he pulled her closer. His other hand found her waist, and she gasped at the contact. Every nerve in her body seemed to wake at once, singing with awareness of him. "I should let you rest," he said, though he made no move to release her. "You've had a long day, a terrifying day." "Don't," she whispered, surprising herself. "Don't leave me alone. Not yet." Something in his chest tightened. This girl, this blind Omega, who had been mocked and scorned her entire life, was choosing to stay with him. The cursed king, the untouchable monster. He drew her to the fire, settling them both on the furs spread before the hearth. She curled against his side, her head resting on his shoulder, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, Morpheus felt something like peace. "Tell me about yourself," he commanded softly. And so she did, haltingly at first, then with growing confidence, she told him of her life, of losing her sight as a child to a fever that nearly killed her, of her stepbrother's cruelty and her pack's rejection, of the small dreams she'd harbored, dreams of finding a place where she belonged. He listened, his jaw growing tighter with each story of her mistreatment. By the time she finished, his hands had curled into fists. "They will never hurt you again," he vowed. "Do you understand me, Elara? You are under my protection now. Anyone who dares to harm you will answer to me." She tilted her face up toward him, and in the firelight he could see the shimmer of tears on her cheeks. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you protect someone like me?" "Because," he said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper, "you are the first person in my life who has ever made me feel human. The bond deepens between the cursed king and the blind Omega, who should never have survived his touch. Tomorrow they would face the council's judgment together, but tonight the palace held its breath, knowing everything had changed. The untouchable king had found his salvation, and nothing would ever be the same. Until next time, may your love be fierce, your fate be wild, and your hearts forever untamed."